Hi and welcome to our latest Life Lessons video. This is the first in a two-part series on reparenting the inner child. We get lots of questions about, David, you talk about inner child work, inner child healing, but how do I actually do that work? Welcome to our Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons series. In each episode, we answer your questions, reveal the powerful life lesson, and offer you lots of practical tips and advice to help you live in balance, harmony, and flow. So in this first part, David, I want to go back to basics in terms of some of the key principles you teach on working with the inner child and this reparenting. We've had a question. You talk about parenting the inner child using compassionate self-discipline and emotional education. But what do these concepts actually mean?
Oh, great. Some great questions. I think it's always worth spending 30 seconds just for those people new to this work, just to emphasize what we're talking about. When we're talking about the inner child, it's a label we're giving to the part of your mind. And this is the part of the mind that when you were a child, a sensitive child, and I've experienced in my professional life the ages between 6 years old and 9 years old. Around that time is very important because that was when your sensitivity, being a sensitive child, was fully developed. And then something happened in your life. It can be one thing, or it could be a series of things. It could be something very serious like abuse, sexual, emotional, physical. It could be a family breaking up, a death in the family. It could be moving home, being bullied at school. Try not to think one thing is worse than the other, because if it's important to you, it's important. And then as a child, those incidences create a very strong emotional feeling, like a tsunami feeling that is completely overwhelming to the child. The child hasn't got the cognitive reasoning to work it through, to understand what's going on, to deal with that situation. And some people say, well, why don't they go and consult their parents? But unfortunately, for a lot of my clients, it could be the parents that's involved in the dysfunctionality. So the child is left to their own devices. And then the child says what I call the vow, V-O-W, the vow. At the height of the emotional trauma, the child says to themselves, it must be me. There's something wrong with me. And that vow creates a separation. And this is what we're talking about with the inner child work. The inner child is a label for you to work on yourself, something that gives you more access to that, because you've got to understand where that separation comes from and how to bring the healing together. And from that vow, then you start saying what we call the three lies. I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, and I'm unworthy. So the healing or the reparenting is to try and bring those two together.
Yeah, and in our last video, and I'll put a link to it, we talk more about this separation of the inner child part of you and the Shen kind of spiritual, the essence of you, and that this inner child healing is to bring them back together as one. So what would you say then, David, is the first step in this reparenting process?
Okay, so the Taoists, I talk a lot about the power of three. The Taoists see this as the power of three. So what's the first step is you have to look after yourself. If you want to use this analogy of being the parent, you have to become the parent. So you have to start to deal with all of the stuff that's going on in your life and being responsible and accountable for you. Growing up, taking responsibility. Stop the CCJ, comparing, criticizing, being judgmental. Stop looking around and worrying what other people say. You've got to think about that first. Are you a person who can parent a child? Are you being self-responsible and being accountable for what you think and what you say? And here's the number one thing. The number one thing is your self-talk. Please do not believe that because it's self-talk, it doesn't matter. The things you say to yourself, it doesn't really matter because no one else is listening to that. Remember one of my quotes. When you say that self-talk, it's a conversation with the universe. The universe is listening to you, and that has a dramatic effect on you. You cannot do this work if you don't get this first stage right of being truth and honest to yourself, treating yourself with integrity.
And so what we're talking about here is it's almost like the adult part of you. So the adult part of me, Alex's mind, Alex's energy in human form, it's making sure that part of me is balanced, truthful, or living authentically, thinking authentically, not lying to myself, not criticizing myself. So what you're saying, it's almost like going to parenting night school to make sure that you're 100% balanced yourself in your kind of day-to-day adult life.
Yeah.
Is almost like prep work.
It's putting your house in order.
Yeah, putting your house, your emotional house in order to be a good parent as you embark upon this parenting journey with contacting and communicating with and working with your inner child.
Absolutely. And the number one thing for that is your self-talk.
Yeah.
This is where the cracks appear. This is the first kind of bit that goes wrong. The self-talk should always be truthful with the highest integrity. What you say to yourself, you should be able to say out loud. Now, think about your self-talk. Could you speak that self-talk out loud so other people hear it? And a lot of people almost create this this duality again, where what they say to themselves, they wouldn't say out loud. And if you don't get that first bit right, if you want to be a parent, do the work to become a parent. Respect yourself. Have high integrity about what you say and what you do. Have a clear intention. But above all, this is about being self-responsible and being accountable for yourself, for what you think, taking full responsibility. I can't keep repeating that word enough. Full responsibility. Don't look around and blaming other people. Well, if they hadn't have said this, or I'm worried about what they're thinking or they're saying. Take responsibility for you. That's the first step. Please try that. And that's going to take you a while. I don't expect you to do it and just quickly do it. Because when you do it with some earnest intention, you'll realize just how poor your self-talk is.
Yeah.
For some of my clients, it's terrible.
Well, would you say, David, this is more about, if we're talking about being more authentic, more truthful, more balanced, this really is about learning to connect more and amplify the voice of our Shen, our higher self, our essence, our spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it. It's because I guess for many people, for decades of adulthood, they have let the energy, the voice of the inner child dominate. And they've been pulled around by their inner child, and they've ignored this authenticity, this higher self, this essence, this pure essence, divine energy of who they are. They've ignored that. So what you're talking about, step one, is an exercise in reconnecting to the Shen part of our energy, that authentic part. And then I know the Taoists teach that the Shen, if we can reconnect to that Shen energy, that then is the mother energy, which is best placed to educate, to guide, to support the child energy, which is the human energy, the human-centered mind energy. And the two will work together.
That's why I smiled when I heard that parenting, because I'd never heard that before. But that Shen energy, that spiritual energy, is the Chinese thing about that. There's almost a loving mother that looking after the child. I love that quote that the French philosopher said. Let me see if I can remember his name. Pierre de Chardin. I'm sorry if I've got that pronunciation wrong. But he said a wonderful quote. He said, we have to choose. Do we believe that we're a human being having a spiritual experience? Or do we believe we're a spiritual being having a human experience? And I believe the second. I believe that we're a spiritual being, what I call Shen. And that's that mother energy. So to do this reparenting work, you have to get fit. You have to clear out your decks. You have to boost yourself up. Because the next step that we're going to talk about is when you start addressing the child. Well, the first thing the child will do is to test you, like any child. And for a long time, you have not been listening to the child. For a long time, you've been ignoring what the child has been saying. So to come to the child now and say, right, things are going to change here, you think the child is going to go, oh, okay, then that's fine. Yeah. The child doesn't do that. So the first step is to get your house in order. Second step then, now you can do what we're calling the reparenting. Now you can start to work with a child. So for those of you who have children, let's just say that you've let your child stay up late.
Till 11 o'clock every night.
Till 11 o'clock at night. You've never said anything to them. They can go to bed whenever they want to. They can play computer games in their bedroom. And all of a sudden you think, well, it'd be a good idea if they went to bed at 8 o'clock.
It'd be better for them. Exactly. Better for them, better for me. We'd be all a much happier family, yeah.
Do you think when you went to the child and said, right, bed tonight at 8 o'clock, that they would say, oh, okay, Mum, Dad, that's a great idea. Let's go to bed. Yeah. No.
I can see your point of view. Yes, I can see this is a well-meaning request.
And this is for the best for me, really, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
The child will push back. And the second step is re-educating your child. The moment you start to put some compassionate self-discipline, so here's where I call it compassionate self-discipline. We're not talking about beating your child up or being harsh on your child, because guess what? You've already been doing that and it doesn't work. It just toughens up the child. But you have to start to think about putting some boundaries or some foundations in, some training if you want to. So you have to build up that trust, that mutual respect. And if you can't do that mutual respect, if you haven't done stage one, and you are a respectful character. So what you say, you mean. You speak with honesty and integrity. You speak truthfully. So if you say something like to a child, if you said to your physical child, right, bedtime is 8 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock comes and the child has a temper tantrum, you say, oh, all right, we'll stop up a half an hour later then. You've lost that integrity. So it's the same idea. Okay. This reparenting idea is a good idea. You've got to work, once you've done stage one, stage two is working with your child, compassionate self-discipline. You know, working with your child to bring the separation together, to bring the child and the adult back together, coming back together as one.
So step two then is starting to put in place some ground rules with the child, rather than, say, before you were letting the child pull you all around the place. So your kind of emotional energy was swinging all over the place. Now you're trying to bring things back into a balance. Yep. Put in some ground rules, if we like, which we know are going to be healthy for you as the parent and the child, and then obviously holistically as the oneness of you.
But the important thing is you are prepared for the resistance.
Yeah. So, but this is the whole point of the compassionate self-discipline, because the child, as you said, will resist. It will 100% resist. Straight the first time you try it. The second time you try it, it will resist. It will find a way out. It will want to avoid. It will want to give up. It will want to give you all the reasons why it shouldn't do what you're suggesting, why it's too difficult, why it's impossible, why it's not going to be helpful, why it'd be easier to do another way.
And then you'll hear the lies. You're not good enough. You can't cope.
You won't
You're
be able
unlovable.
To do this.
You can't
it's
do
not worth
this.
Doing.
You're not strong enough. You're vulnerable. You're blah, 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 blah. But you've heard them all, haven't you? Haven't you in your head?
So,
this is what it tells you. This is how it's controlling you. That's why you've got to do that first bit.
Yeah.
You've got to be strong because you've got to stand up to the child. We're not beating up the child, but we are showing him now that we're in control, or showing her that we're in control.
So standing firm. So it's almost like doing the groundwork, as you say, with the Shen, strengthening your Shen, or reconnecting to your Shen, reconnecting to your authenticity, reconnecting to your intention that this work is worth it, despite, you know, the resistance you're going to get initially. That's almost like sending down the roots which give you the stability, so that when you get the pushback from the inner child, that you can stand firmly rooted and compassionately firm with the child. So what we're saying, compassionate self-discipline means not giving in.
Not giving in, because you have two alternatives.
Not letting the child give you the CCJ, give you the lies, and start to believe the child.
Absolutely. Because you have two alternatives. And it's pretty straightforward. You either do this work or you carry on down this road of going round and around and around. It will not heal itself. No one else can do it for you. So if you're constantly looking externally for external validation, for external approval, for external strokes and love, this is the problem. You're not taking the self-responsibility, and then you stay on the carousel, going around and around, poo me, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable. Now the child will want to put you on that carousel. And remember, we've talked about this every video. The child likes that carousel because it's familiar. The child is used to it. The child doesn't like the unknown. So when you start to give it something like self-discipline, which it's never given it before, it is going to kick off big time. And this is where you've got to do stage one and make sure you're ready for this and you're firm, because you won't get it right. We talked on the last video about falling off your bike and getting back on and pedaling. I can tell you, this is where you'll fall off your bike in every time.
And that's then about being compassionate with yourself. That,
Absolutely.
you know, accepting you're not perfect. You will fall off the bike. You will inevitably not get everything right, not get the inner child to work with you in the way you'd like it to in the first few stages. But have that compassionate self-discipline to just dust yourself off and try again. Try again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, because authentically, you know, you're rooted, you're grounded in the knowledge that this process is worth it.
Yeah. So this first stage can affect your emotions the most. That's why this second stage, let's get it right, this second stage of engaging with your child and bringing them into one, this can affect your emotions the most, because your child has a direct connection to your emotions. That's when you'll start using words like fearful, scared, overwhelmed, all of these words. That's why getting stage one is the most important. Getting yourself fit to do this first stage. It's like getting fit, training to do the marathon. This is the marathon now. This is where you and the child have got to work hard. Maybe, certainly for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, because the child will not give up. Because, you know, again, we've spoke about this how many times. One of the qualities of the child is its determination. It is stubborn. I nearly swore there. But it is very stubborn. It will not give in. It doesn't like the unknown. It wants to push you down. It wants you to give up. And in the past, you've always given up. And so it thinks if it keeps on pushing, keeps on pushing, keeps on pushing, guess what? You will give up. And you will let it have its own way. That's why stage one, doing that training, is very important. So you are totally focused. This is why these videos are hopefully here to help you, that you're expecting it. That you, when you're doing that marathon run at 20 miles, you can go, I'm trained and I can carry on the extra 5 miles, because you have to push through that last little bit.
And this idea of compassionate self-discipline, I know in the main introductory inner child video that we've done, and again, I'll put a link to it, we use the super nanny analogy that, the child's running wild in the house, it's ruling the roost, it's overpowering its parents. The super nanny comes in and starts to put in these ground rules, and the child will push against them. But the super nanny encourages the parent, the mother or the father, to just keep being persistent. And then eventually the child starts to give in. Yeah. The child starts to trust you. The child starts to actually feel the benefit of doing things the way you're suggesting, even though it wasn't originally its idea and it wanted to stay in the way it wanted to stay. The idea is, it's almost like, using the watercourse analogy, the river wearing away the immovable rock. Eventually, it's through persistence, through the gradual soft persistence of the compassionate self-discipline, change happens.
But another way to look at this as well is the child really values the known against the unknown. So if you are persistent, strong, unwavering, then that becomes the known. Yeah. And then the child will just accept that, because that is now the known. It knows it'll try all of the tricks in the books for you to give up. Mm-hmm. But if it knows it won't, then that becomes the known. And then the child then comes together. And that's the oneness we talk about in Taoism. Remember, the vow has created this separation. We are now talking about the marrowing of the two together. The child part of you and the Shen coming together as one, as one unit, in oneness. And this is really what we're talking about. Yeah. This is why the first stage is important. Get your training right. This is the stage where the fireworks happen.
Yeah, and actually the child will push against the ground rules, the new authentic way of doing things. But it prefers that to mixed messages. So this is why actually it's good, just like any child, or, if you haven't got children, like a pet, even, if you're consistent with applying the same ground rules, and okay, you may have a lapse, but overall, there's a consistent application of the rules and explaining why we're going to do things differently now, why we're going to deal with this situation differently now, why we're going to deal with this person differently now. Then, as you say, it becomes familiar for the child. But if you're chopping and changing and sometimes reverting back to what the child wants, sometimes going to another extreme, sometimes going back to the authentic way, that in itself, those mixed messages only serve to confuse the child.
And confuse you.
And
there's what we call the maze of confusion. You're in the maze now. Yeah. See, and the child will kind of like that because it's familiar. He's not changing. The child really doesn't want to change. Even though he knows this way is not working, it values the familiarity. So if the child can persuade you to go into the maze of confusion, it's won. And you're running around the maze, getting lost, and the child makes it more and more confusing. Yeah. I'm smiling because this is the stage where I normally meet my clients when they're trying to control that part of the mind that they call the inner child, and the inner child is kicking off. Remember, it's you. It's showing your strength. Nothing's bad going to happen here. But you have a choice. You either take control and live your life authentically and truthfully with honesty and integrity, or you keep on playing this game as with your child and allowing your child to win. This is why you've got to do stage one. Get yourself fit, focused. Know what you're going to do. Don't make it too harsh. Make it loving, caring, compassionate. Yeah. All of the things that we talk about. But there has to be a firmness, and this is why people get misunderstood about sensitivity. You can do this sensitively as long as you're firm. Being firm doesn't mean to say you're not sensitive. Being sensitive means, as Alex said, it's your superpower. You can do it with sensitivity, but you don't waver. And so
this idea of compassion rather than just discipline. So what that means is you communicate the ground rules in a way that the child understands. So in a soft way, in a soft but firm way. So we're not saying, you must do this, I'm not listening to you, this is for your own good. It's none of that.
No.
It's just firm explanations that this is the way we're going to do this now, and I'm going to look after you, and we're going to make sure this is all right. And if you've got any concerns about this, we'll talk about it later. And, as you would age appropriately communicate with a child in a way that is sensitive to their needs, is not harsh, is not going to scare them, is not going to box them off.
Absolutely. And saying to him, the more you give me a temper tantrum or a squealing piglet, the less we can talk, because I can't hear you. Yeah. So if there's anything I'm saying you disagree with, then we'll communicate. You see, and that's the coming together then. Mm-hmm. Now you're starting to become a team. You're moving away from the separation, from the duality, and you're coming together as a team, as one. And that's when you get on to the third stage. But this is the most fiery stage.
Yeah.
The first stage, I think, is the most important. Getting yourself fit for this work, watching yourself talk, clearing up your roles, knowing that you can do this. And then this is the second stage, when you're engaging this child who's had no discipline, who's been running wild, and now is trying to put some foundational work in there.
Yeah, great. So stage 3 then.
Stage 3 now, hopefully, after a month of long nights and lots of crying and lots of upset, we are a team. Now we can go on and do what I call the emotional education. Now we can go and address life's problems, where life doesn't go the way that you believe that they should go to, or may believe that you're entitled. To deal with life's twists and turns that we call life lessons. That's when you can go and address when things are not fair, when things don't work out the way that you would want them to be. Number one, when you realize that you are not in control. The child will always want to be safe and secure. But what the child is actually saying to you is, not safe and secure, I want to be in control. I want to be in control of everything around me so nothing adverse happens to me. But emotional education, we have to teach the child and teach you together that is not the reality that we live in. We've talked a lot in our videos about we do not live in a utopian Disney world where everything works out exactly how you think it should be, that's fair and right and proper for you. It doesn't work out the way that you believe you're entitled to be. Life is not like that in reality. Life has twists and turns and has this great ability to slap you in the face when you least expect it. And you've got to be able to have the education, the emotional education, to deal with those life lessons, because that's why we call them life lessons. There's something you're not expecting. There's something that mostly comes out of the blue, slaps you in the face. There's a lesson there for you to learn. Can I give you what the lesson normally is? From a Taoist perception, acceptance. Acceptance is a great lesson. Not accepting that there's something wrong with you, but accepting that life does not work out the way that you expect it to. And also not accepting that what happened to you often in childhood, which can be quite traumatic or quite horrific. We're not talking about acceptance that was okay that it happened. No, the opposite. It's just accepting that it happened. That's right. So, and how do you then deal with it? And that's learning the lesson. So if, as Alex said, is very important, because I'm sure as you're listening to this, that came into your head. So Alex is absolutely right. We're not accepting that what happened to you was okay, and it should have happened to you. Or they were okay, or, the situation was okay. We're accepting that it did happen in the past. Now, what is the lesson that you've learned from that you can take from that equips you, that when you hit another twist or turn in your life, you can deal with it. You have everything you need. You are awesome. People laugh when I say this. You are awesome. You have every skill that you need to deal with the lessons that come your way. All we're trying to do is to get you that access to those lessons that you already know. And it's about believing in yourself, loving yourself, valuing yourself, and using those skills you already have.
Well, when you say access the knowledge or the wisdom that you already know, what we're saying actually is the Shen part of us,
Absolutely.
this mother-father-parent part of us, already knows that acceptance is the truth.
Yeah.
It already knows, it understands the oneness. The Shen already understands that you can't control anything. All you can do is control within. So the Shen part of our energy has this deep wisdom, and it's just about reconnecting to that. It's not going off learning new stuff. It's not about going off getting teachings from gurus. It's not about a long-winded process. This comes back to step one, really, and it's tapping into that knowledge, which then you can communicate once you've got the lines of communication open with the inner child through the self-discipline practice, that you can communicate softly and gently these truths to educate emotionally that inner child that has been blocked, that has been stuck, that has been locked in a prison, in lockdown from the childhood experiences, which has caused it to go in on itself, which has caused it to say the vow we talk about, it must be me, there's something wrong with me, which has caused the child to misunderstand and label itself with the 3 lies. I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I can't manage, I'm unlovable. Mm-hmm. It's about educating the child the truth that none of that is true.
Well, that's why when you got the second step right and you're a team, then when you go and address the life lessons, then instead of the child shouting and screaming and overpowering, as Alex has just explained, your Shen nature to actually resolve and to solve these from a spiritual point of view, now you're a team, you work together. So the child shouts off, but you now are equally as strong to be able to address these things, learn the lessons, teach the child the lesson, and then you move on. And as Alex quite rightly said, you do not have to do what I had to do and go and live in the Chinese mountains for 30 years. You've already got this. You already have this information. This is the Shen, the spirit, the essence, whatever you want to call it, the highest, I don't particularly like higher self, but you know what I mean? That part of you can't put in a bottle. You can't show somebody your spirit, but you know you've got it. And once you start to connect to that more and stronger, and then all of these twists and turns, you'll learn the lesson. And then that absolutely allows you to spiritually grow. That amazingness about you will absolutely demonstrate itself in every part of your life. And this is so important because this is the filter we're talking about. You know, when we talk about the filter, that means every part of your life, not only relationships, but your career, your physical life, your parenting skills, your friendships, every part of your life, your health, your well-being, the way you sleep, every single part of you. When you have that balance right, everything goes through that filter.
And also, the more you practice getting comfortable with being the parent yourself, connecting to your Shen as part of the process, the more you practice the compassionate self-discipline, the more you look within for the lessons that you can emotionally educate your child with, the more effortless, the more easy, the more wu-wei this whole process becomes. So yes, at first, because most of us have never kind of taken this reparenting, self-parenting role for ourselves, because we've always expected our parents or other people as we grow up to do it for us. So at first it will feel a bit clunky, a bit awkward. We'll get frustrated with it. But the more you do it, the more you'll do it with ease, the more enjoyable the whole thing will become. And as David says, you will then flourish in
because
every
it's
aspect.
More familiar
it's
as well.
more familiar for you as the parent. So the last thing I just wanted to ask you, David, is on a practical level, a day-to-day level, we talked about, consistency, no mixed messages, to the inner child with the compassionate self-discipline. So that means we must be applying the compassionate self-discipline all day, every day, not have an off day, not have an off week. Or if we do, we need to get back on the bike as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the emotional education, so listening to the inner child's concerns, the inner child's grumbles, the inner child's fears.
Unfairness.
Unraveling them.
Yes.
Whether it's one of the 3 lies, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I can't manage, I'm unworthy, or whether it's, this is unfair, that's unfair, this shouldn't have happened. On a day-to-day level, when we hear the inner child giving us that self-talk, how do we do that emotional education?
So on a day-to-day basis, of course, if you're at work or the kids have just come home from school, you can't just say to them, stop everybody, I've got to go to the toilet and do some emotional education. Of course you can't. Sometimes you can. Sometimes it's when you're sitting down quiet and having a cup of tea and the child starts off and you can do the work straight away. What I would say, and I guess you know what I'm going to say, that everybody should be doing 10 or 15 minutes of meditation a day. And when I say meditation, I'm talking about this work, being focused, controlling your mind. This is on the first stage as well. Before you start the process, I would recommend you getting into a habit, 10, 15 minutes a day. You can do it when you wake up first thing in bed, last thing at night when you're having a cup of tea, and just dropping your shoulders and taking a breath, and then dealing with the issues that the child is giving you previously.
So in your self-talk? In
your self-talk. Yeah. The self-talk is the number one thing, as I said. Listen to that self-talk. There will be lots of work for you to do there to get that straight. And this is why we run the Facebook community, so we can share when people say, well, this is what my self-talk says. What's your views on this? And
or I woke up in the middle of the night last night and my inner child and my self-talk was going crazy, telling me, this, that, and the other. And then it's sitting down in a quiet meditation or journaling or with a diary or going for a walk, setting aside the time to listen and address those concerns and give the child the teaching. That's the emotional education.
Absolutely. But you see, if you haven't done stage 2 and bringing together, the child will not accept the teaching because it doesn't trust you. So that's why we split it up into 3 stages. First one, get yourself fit and healthy and ready for the fight, in inverted commas. Second one, you've got the wrestling match with the child. Third one, now together you deal with emotional education and the life lessons, because life will not be the way you want it to. I'm sorry, if you're expecting life to pan out the way you think is fair, it won't happen. That's reality. That's the reality that you live in. That's the reality I live in. That's the reality we all live in. Life has twists and turns. Things happen we don't like. And it's how we deal with them defines who we are as a person. That defines the oneness of who we are. So please, as Alex said, if you don't like the thought of meditating, try some journaling, try walking the dog, but just go over these until you find the resolution. Join the Facebook community and put it on Facebook, and you'll see the members are all pile in, because you guess what? They've all had the same experience. We're all going through the same journey.
It's the human experience. It's the, this process of inner child work, inner child healing and reparenting the inner child.
It's great work, though. It's very interesting and life-changing. I mean, doing this work, imagine that you put your hand on the rudder of your boat and you guide yourself. You know how many videos do I talk about the river? We're on the river again, aren't we? And we're guiding ourselves down the river. But be careful of this river, because there's some crocodiles and there's some boulders and there's waterfalls. So make sure you're looking ahead. You've got a clear mind and you can guide your canoe or boat or speedboat down the river. Be the captain of your ship. Put your hand on that rudder.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Great.
I had to get in the water.
You did. So in next week's video, we will be talking about reparenting, but we're going to be addressing some specific questions we've had people struggling with reparenting their inner child, hitting kind of blocks. So we're going to go through some practical examples of how you may get stuck with the process and what to do about it. So that will be in next week's video, part 2. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments on this video, so on connecting to that Shen mother parent side of you, on compassionate self-discipline, or emotional education, any thoughts or questions, please post them below. For anybody who's interested in doing some one-to-one inner child work with David, because that's obviously David works every day with clients on this, on their personal inner child issues and personal inner child life lessons, I will also put a link below as well so you can learn more about how to work with David. And so we look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.